We're talking about remarkably speedy justice in the Alec Murdaugh double murder trial. Just 3 hours of deliberation to convict him of killing his wife Maggie and son Paul. The jury presented with a comprehensive and tight timeline of events by the prosecution. Take a look.
Then what did you do?
I put the chicken up.
All right. How long did that take? Did you get out of the golf cart to do that?
I did.
All right. And you had to go walk to where it was?
Well, yeah. I mean, a few feet, but I did that, yes.
All right. So how long did that take? I mean,
Seconds.
we're at 8:46 now. How long did that take?
Seconds.
Just seconds? All right. And what did you do after that?
Got back on the golf cart.
What did you do after that?
I left.
You left.
Now,
Just
did I
jumped
leave?
on the golf cart and left.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to say. Did I get on the golf cart and leave that second? Probably not. But did I get on the golf cart and leave very quickly after that? I did.
Okay. Yeah, I think you testified yesterday. I got out of there.
I did.
Why'd you get out of there so quick, Mr. Murdaugh?
Because it was chaotic, it was hot.
And you testified you went inside and the TV's on, right?
I did go inside, and the TV was on.
Okay. And you laid down? Is that right?
I did.
All right. Before you said you'd been napping for an hour or so, or napping that entire time, but now you laid down on the couch?
That's correct.
All right. And maybe dozed for a second,
Maybe.
according to your new story? How long did you doze?
If I dozed, extremely short time.
You would agree with me that from 9:02 to 9:06, your phone finally comes to life and starts showing a lot of steps.
I do agree with that.
What were you doing?
I was getting ready to go to my mom's house.
Far more steps in a shorter time period than any time prior, as you've seen from the testimony in this case. So what were you so busy doing?
That's
Going to the bathroom?
no, I don't think that I
Did you get on a
went
treadmill?
to the bathroom. No, I didn't get on a treadmill.
Jog in place?
Nope, I didn't jog in
Jumping
place.
jacks?
No, sir, I did not do jumping jacks. I know what I wasn't doing, Mr. Waters, and what I wasn't doing is doing anything, as I believe you've implied, that I was cleaning off or washing off guns, or putting guns in a raincoat, and I can promise you that I wasn't doing any of that.
I'm back now with our panel. There's this other moment that he ticked through all the things that somebody would have had to have been there exactly right after he left in the few seconds or minutes that they would have had to come with no guns and realizing that there would be guns there, and that they would have left and taken the exact same path that he took when he left.
Yeah, the prosecution established a really tight timeline. I think they had it down to about 17 minutes between when there's the cell phone video where the defendant's at the kennels with Paul and Maggie, and then where I think the time when when the defendant left Moselle to go see his mother. Right? That was the tight timeline they were working with. And I continue to think that was the most important evidence for the prosecution, was to just pin down that timeline, which made it just seem utterly implausible that somebody else would have been able to get to this remote property, which maybe the jury site visit helped establish how remote it was, and get there at precisely that time when Paul and Maggie would be alone at the kennels, knowing that there would be weapons available.
Randy, I mean, you were there. How did you think that played when the prosecutor did that?
I think it played really, really well with the jury because they had heard so much information, Anderson, and they weren't allowed to take any notes during this trial. So they put on an investigator from SLED in the final day of the trial of the state's case, at least, and that's the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. And he ticked through this timeline and helped the jury really understand and put the pieces together. And just a couple of inconsistencies, as you heard some of them there. But if he was at the kennels at 8:44 and then at 8:47 he said he left the kennels, 8:49 he's back at the house. That is the time that prosecutors believe Maggie and Paul were dead, by 8:49. He said he went to take a nap, okay, but that was at 8:49. He took a very quick nap, maybe 12 or 13 minutes, because you heard him say at 9:02 his phone started showing steps, 283 steps in just 4 minutes. That is a lot of steps in just 4 minutes. And then he said he left to go to his mother's house at 9:07. So did he take a nap? He seemed to be sort of backtracking on that. And then at 9:08, the GPS data showed that his car slowed down at the very spot, Anderson, where Maggie Murdaugh's phone was found on the side of the road in the woods. So that was a very, very critical timeline for them to spell out for the jury.
So let's talk about possible issues for appeal. The financial crimes, there was a lot of evidence admitted. Is that a problem, or is that something the defense can use?
It could be. So we always go through this at trials where one side is trying to admit evidence, the other side saying it's prejudicial, it's unfair, it shouldn't be used. Let's talk about as it relates to this case. As it relates to this case, you have all this financial information. Defense is saying, listen, this is not a financial fraud case, this is a murder case. What's the relevance of this? And not only that, it's prejudicial. The jury's going to get the view that he can't be trusted, right? Well, then, of course, what ends up happening is that the prosecution says this is all motive. Their whole argument was that they being the prosecution, that Alec Murdaugh did this because the world was closing in, because he was running amok in finances, because he was about to be outed, that his world was crumbling, and so he had to kill his wife and his son. So if it goes to the issue of motive, it then becomes admissible. The issue is whether it's so overwhelmingly damning and prejudicial as to be problematic. That will be a significant issue on appeal.
Do the trials for the financial crimes, do they continue now?
They can, and I expect that they would, unless the defendant pleads guilty to them. I mean, he's already admitted under oath in this trial to having committed, I believe, all the crimes he's been charged with. And so that would be very damning evidence if he were to go to trial on those charges. Now, it may be, depending on what the sentence is, that the prosecution, after consulting with the victims of those financial frauds, decides not to go forward. But, especially in light of the appellate issues that Joey was just referencing, one additional reason to go forward with the financial fraud charges would be on the chance that his conviction for the murders were overturned on appeal.
Mark O'Mara, you're a defense attorney. Do you think there's grounds for an appeal?
There's going to be a lot of grounds to try and get an appeal. However, the way the appellate court looks at this is, was it so prejudicial that it caused an unfair trial? And they always do what's called a harmless error sort of standard, which is, was there so much compelling evidence that even if there was a mistake at trial, even if there was a prejudice, as Joey said, to the defense, is it harmless because there was so much other compelling evidence? And with a 3-hour verdict, with 5 weeks worth of testimony, with everything that we have now seen and looking through the prism of the guilty verdict, I think the appellate court's going to say there were some mistakes here, but it was harmless, and we're going to allow the conviction to stand.
Jury consultant Jill Huntley-Taylor, what are you most interested in hearing from the members of the jury?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I mean, I think that I would be really curious to hear, what was most important to them and how they reached their decision. I think there was a lot of talk about motive, and I know they don't need a motive, but jurors usually do need a motive. What did they think was the motive, and what did it matter to them? So I'd be most curious to know what it was that kind of crossed the line for them. Was it the big lie, or was it something more, or was it a combination? And then what point really did they make their decision?
That was one of the questions all along of, the prosecution's, the motive that they put forward was, well, he's trying to cover up this financial crime. That was always the question, would the jury believe that was such a compelling motive that he would do what seems to be unthinkable, which is point blank, point a shotgun and a rifle at your son and wife and pull the trigger repeatedly?
I thought that was actually a really interesting part of the prosecution's rebuttal. The prosecutor said toward the end of it, we don't have to prove motive. I think I've proved motive. I think I know why he did it, which is he loved Alex. And he loved Alex more than he loved Paul and Maggie. And so this may have not forever solved his problems, but it put it off for a while. And so he did what he needed to do in that moment for Alex. And I thought that was really interesting. It was an acknowledgement that maybe the state's theory of motive wasn't perfect, but it was the best they could come up with. And at the end of the day, they didn't have to prove motive.
In this HBO Max documentary, they have the prison phone calls between Alec Murdaugh and Buster after he's, incarcerated, obviously. And they're just pathetically sad. I mean, just the long silences, they have very little to say to each other. I mean, the whole thing is just tragic, obviously.
And look, there's no right to privacy in a prison. These calls are constantly recorded. It's interesting that that's part of it because we get to see the dynamic. But what's interesting to me, Anderson, and what I'm going to be looking for when the jurors are actually interviewed, they may very well say, look, we don't know if that was the motive, nor do we even give it that much weight. What we do know is he's the guy that did it. And I think at the end of the day, that's what matters, because every lawyer will tell you that motive just doesn't have to be proven, is not an element of the crime. Yes, inquiring minds, jurors want to know, but you don't have to establish that. So I just want to hear what they have to say about that motive issue.
Maggie Murdaugh's sister took the stand. Marion Proctor was her name, and I just want to play some of her testimony.
She loved her family. She loved her boys.
What was your understanding of Maggie's intent or what they were going to do that night?
I was under the impression they were going over to Alameda to visit his parents.
You encouraged her to go to Murdaugh.
I did.
Was that the last time you talked to her?
Yes. I just couldn't believe it. I didn't think it was true. I asked him, I said, Alec, do you have any idea who's done this? I said, we have got to find out who could do this. And he said that he did not know who it was, but he felt like whoever did it had thought about it for a really long time.
Did that strike you as odd?
I just didn't know what that meant. We would talk about the boat case, and he was very intent on clearing Paul's name.
What did he say?
He said that his number one goal was clearing Paul's name. And I thought that was so strange, because my number one goal was to find out who killed my sister and Paul.
And Alex, was he grieving greatly?
Oh, terribly.
I mean, people have
We were all-
described him as being destroyed. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yes.
That's Maggie Murdaugh's sister, Marion Proctor. It's interesting that she was saying that that Alec was saying that his number one goal is to clear Paul's name. Again, there is video from the hospital the night of the boat accident where a teenager has been killed, and the evidence suggests that Paul was at the wheel, of Alec Murdaugh with his father going to the hospital, going room to room, trying to get people to, not necessarily talk to police. Here's a lawyer that we can get you, trying to kind of massage the whole incident to take Paul out of the equation.
I think that was part of the prosecution's theory of the gathering storm here, sort of overall, was the sense that he cared not only about his finances, but about his name and his legacy, his family's legacy in the community. And so that story is consistent with the story you're talking about with respect to the boating accidents. Let's just get our family out of this incident.
I also wonder how much the drug use, I guess there is evidence that he was spending this amount of money on drugs, but how long did the drug use predate his financial crimes? He was using the drug use, saying that's what the financial crimes were. Right? So I had a huge, I was addicted to opioids. But which came first? It's not clear to me. I'm not sure if that much of that was presented. Randy, was there a lot of testimony about that in court?
There was a lot of talk of his alleged opioid use and this habit of his, and even the defense tried to use it as an excuse for him lying to investigators, that he was paranoid and he'd been taking so many opioids that he just wasn't thinking right. He was acting like an addict. And he even used the opioids as an excuse for when he was trying to explain when he showered that day and the whole clothing change on June 7th. He said, well, he'd been in the field with Paul during the day, in the afternoon, riding around the property, and he was a lot bigger then, and he was sweaty, and that the opioids made him sweat a lot. So he definitely sprinkled that throughout his testimony, and the defense sprinkled that as well. But it's really unclear. We know the financial crimes have been going on for decades, so he apparently has been using both.
But when you look at what's happening in the days immediately before this, because we're still kind of searching around the motive that was introduced, but not laid out in a smoking gun way. It's you've got Alex Murdaugh's wife is staying at the beach house, which I think is her family's, but not living with him at home. You've got the son who finds the computer bag with the bags full of hundreds of pills. In his mind, you may have if my wife goes south on me and we end up in a divorce proceeding and she's going to testify as to what she knows, what she's heard, what she's seen, it's something you referenced a minute ago. His world is crashing in around him. And he's thinking, and I'm projecting here, he's thinking, how do I change these factors? What do I have to eliminate out of this equation, and how will it affect my future?
And what's so stunning about that is it's only, I think, a couple of days, I'll have to look up the exact amount of days, after he has killed his wife and son for that very reason, that somebody in his law firm stumbles across a check that was made out to him that shouldn't have been made out to him, and that starts an investigation internally within the law firm that they then start to uncover this unbelievable cavalcade of fraud. We're going to take a short break. We're going to pick up on the questions of the drug use and what it could mean for sentencing after another short break.